Thanks for listening. Welcome to Qualified, the podcast. I'm your host, Hassan Hilliard. Today's episode is about bridging the gap. In this case, being photography. I am a student of the film. Trent, on the other hand, has come into the digital side of it, and together we've collaborated, and that is how our artistic relationship started. Prior to that, though, he was documenting me at one of my races that I was doing in the Burnett, Austin area. That's how we met. And I had no idea who I should be looking for at the time because I'm covered in mud and sweat. But at the same time, when I look over to my left towards the end of the race, there he was snapping pictures. So that's how I knew that's where he was. And that, well, what was that, 2017?
Man, it was a while ago. Yeah, 17 or 16, one of those. Do you remember?
I think it was 17. If I'm not mistaken, it is because, okay, 2016, I was trying to do all three of the Spartan races, just the trifecta thing. And it didn't happen for me in 2016 for one reason or another. I can't even remember that. But in 17, I did all three of them. And that's how you end up. And then I actually jumped into the competitive class at that point because at first it was just a fun run.
I believe you're right. I believe you're right. 2017. Yep.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy when I think about it. We can't even do those anymore. Like there's no Spartan, competition to have. I mean, it's just we're in the COVID environment. You can't even get that many people to converge in that spot.
I didn't think about that. You're right, man. And I was preparing to run one too. Totally not telling the truth. Yeah, you guys watching that Spartan run was amazing because it's a different type of race. It's physical, but it's very mental. And after watching you guys, I was like very amazed that you would go out there and do that on your own and spend your time out there doing it. It's but knowing you now, it speaks 100% to who you are. And so I'm not amazed that you would do it.
Yeah. Dad used to joke about that too. He says, "You're what are you doing this weekend?" So I'm gonna run a Spartan race. Well, how many miles is that? A half marathon. Paying you for this? I said, no. So you doing this for free? Said, yeah. Said, okay. Well, don't die. And I'll see when you get back.
Don't die.
Yeah. It's the worst thing. That's the worst thing. Okay, Trey's in the waiting room. Let me bring him in. Trey, what's up? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, cool. I got Trent online right now. I did a soft introduction, and as well as just a general intro for the podcast itself. But let me introduce you too. So
Okay.
with us joining in, we have Trey Tippins. Tippins is a corporate travel professional, also a good friend of ours. I've known him for 14 years about. How long you guys been knowing each other?
Man, 25 years, 26, 27, way back, man. We go way back.
Yeah, so I'm the baby in the group on actually multiple counts if you really count it that way. Yeah, but the introduction runs as such, and why the episode is important is because number one, we share in the experience of being a part of creative productions, so to speak, the photography side of that, set building, set management as well, when you really think about it that way. And then also travel, what it's like to be in Texas, come from Texas and thrive here as well. There's a couple of topics that we will cover today in the podcast, but it's good to have episode one with a good group of people because you are essentially one of the reasons why I did it. So I wanted to show you my appreciation actually by kicking this off, the inauguration. Can you shed some light, Trent, on what it's like being essentially a freelance photographer as well as an experimenter of concepts out in the Austin area?
Well, in the Austin area, I'll tell you this: it's fun. It's competitive because there's a lot of photographers out there, and when you're in a city like Austin, a lot of people will do a lot of things for free. They'll do a lot of things, for a lower cost. So there's always that aspect of, you have to make sure you get paid what you feel that you're worth. But being in Austin it's exciting because you have all the music concerts. You have people always out doing something, and they want photographs of them doing things. Much like when I ran up there and shot you at the Spartan race, there's always that. And then just walking around Austin all the time is a good way to document the city, as well as a freelance photographer. I can take some pictures of different things around the area and sell those on Getty. So there's always ways to earn a little money when you're working as a freelance photographer. Maybe you.
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about because I didn't know that you sold on Getty, and I was going to bring this up. I actually made those notes. And so how long have you been selling on Getty?
I've probably been selling on Getty for maybe about 2.5, 3 years. Not that long.
Okay. So in the development side note, but in the development meetings that I was having with the Rawkicks development, she's going through a particular little project assignment where she's essentially tasked with putting together a elevator campaign, much like you have to do anyway when you start talking about your business. But she's doing this visually. So I'm just doing the graphic assistance with that. But I went on to a stock photo distribution website, and it wasn't Getty. And I thought about it for a second, and I said, "Wow, these landscapes are really nice. I wonder if you actually, try to sell any of the night, because your technique of photography is different than mine. So yours is very crisp. It's actually very now because it shoots digital, so it's on par with everyone else's, current marketing view of what the photography should be. But mine was more of that, not necessarily Helmut Newton, but Ansel Adams, so to speak. Style, grainy. It's got some noise, but you can still capture the landscape, so to speak. But that's good. You sell. I'm happy to know that because you've answered one of these questions. So the link that you guys have for 25 years ago is East Texas, isn't it?
West Texas, yeah. It's
West Texas.
Yeah. We're both, but we're the same age, separated by like almost 3 months. We met through Trent's older brother, one of his older brothers. His name is Rick, and that's how we met and became associated. But through the years, as we met, we came to find out we had other mutual friends as well. So it's kind of like a little bit small world. We kept in touch. Trent eventually moved to Austin. I used to live in Austin myself for about 5 years prior to moving to Houston. Been here the past going on 21 years now. And we became associated by football as well. Trent played semi-professional football. He'll probably elaborate on that a little bit later. But at the time, I was officiating flag football in tournaments and everything. And Trent played on a couple teams in Lubbock. Then he moved to Austin as well. And I officiated games that he competed in down there too.
I didn't know this. This is 14 years worth of information that we've covered this whole time, and I didn't know anything about the football side. Not to say that I know anything about football, but this part, I didn't know you played semi-pro. And Trey, I didn't know that you was doing officiating either.
Yeah, just to kind of keep myself, after I played collegiate football at the University of Oklahoma, I just wanted to kind of keep myself close to the game and stay associated with just sports in general. And in doing so, me and Trent's brother Rick, we both got into officiating flag football as a way to keep our competitive juices going and close to athletics. And I did that for about 5-6 years. I moved over here to Houston in 2000, and I let it go. I haven't touched it anymore, but me and Trent still collaborate about college football, professional football, talk about those days and everything else.
I think that's really cool, though. See, for me, I was never jealously not into it. I wasn't raised within the conventional sports household, so we pretty much just played face punch over here. But then after that, later on, Dad finds himself spending more time, in front of TV, and he starting to watch games, and he wants me to watch them too. He says, "Hey, come watch the football game," and I'm just staring at him like, "What's wrong with you? Like, we've never done this. Like, I don't even know how to start sitting down watching this game with you." And nor do you know who's playing. You don't know. You're just looking at colors and teams. So I'm even more lost than him.
It's interesting when you say that. Trey and I will either text or call each other while we're watching games, and we watch it from a different lens than most people do. We're like looking at it like, oh, that's a 3-4 defense. That outside linebacker should have had that guy. They should have saw this coming. I mean, so there's so many ways to watch football. So I think the only bad way is without food.
I can agree with you on that. See, that's something that I talked about. I talked about it with my friend Anthony, and he says, the way we look at fights, right, and competitions, you're either going to look at it like a fan or you're going to look at it like a coach. I don't enjoy them the way a fan would enjoy them. I'm not entertained by even really a quick knockout. I mean, you can respect the power and the timing of it all, but I'm not really watching it for that. You know, I'm looking at technique. We're having. I want to have a conversation about it because that's a dance. You're just looking at a long, drawn out dance where two people are trying to communicate with each other until somebody drops. You know, or until the judges decide on who wins, if they're right or not. But that's
Yeah.
the way I look at it analytically.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that because if you're in the game at that level, right, semi-pro, collegiate, you know, that's advanced. Even if you played high school football, you still be you're able to read the book. You know this differently than say Johnny come lately over here saying, "Hey, why are these two guys in pads running away from each other? You know, why is he doing this? Does he not have friends? Why is he running away?" Like that's where I'm at. So nonetheless, though, that's awesome. But as Texans and also as affinite lovers of food, what's that place we went to in Austin? Was it Black's Barbecue?
Right.
Blacks. Yep.
Blacks.
So here's the deal. Like I remember food places really, really well. So but when we went there, we just plowed through all that barbecue. That was right after Trey. I was telling Trent, I said, I think it was 2017 that we were out there together, right?
Right. Somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good trip. It was a really good trip. I was actually surprised I didn't get injured running that race because there was some stuff on that course. But nonetheless, best places to eat in Austin. I found this out. So I was trying to come over for my birthday. Where you told me, hey, back down because you know it's getting hot out here. So you know we got a lot of COVID cases rising. Same in Houston, but we played it safe and did the right thing and all stayed home and stayed safe. Um, when I was looking at the top 10 restaurants because I wanted to treat myself to something, I realized, oh crap, I went to every restaurant that was on this list at least twice. Like I was really familiar with Austin, Dallas, as well as Houston. It was actually disappointing to me that nothing else opened up, you know, since then. But I kind of understand. Where do you think the best restaurant out in Austin is?
Ooh,
Ooh.
that's
Let
a
me
good
press.
one.
Hold on. Let me press because it's COVID and things are probably
Mhm.
closed. But for the sake of nostalgia, where do you remember the best restaurant being? Y'all tell me.
Are we talking barbecue or any other?
We can
All
start
food
with
all together.
barbecue. We can start with barbecue.
And barbecue, there's a few places. There's Valentina's, there's Blacks, there's of course you've heard of Franklin's. Everybody's heard of Franklin's, but only if you have enough time to get through the line. And there's La Barbecue. Those would probably be my top 4 places.
Love barbecue.
La Barbecue. Yes.
Is it like Spanish barbecue, like like the barbecue?
No, it's not at all. Actually, I think it's a shoot off from the barbecue place in Taylor. And Trey may know the name of the one in Taylor, but I think they're all interconnected. Even Franklin is interconnected with La Barbecue and the place out of Taylor. Now, Blacks is Lockhart, but
Mm.
and I don't know if Valentina's has any connection, but it's really good as well. So, what would you
No,
say, Trey?
I think the cook, the guy from Valentina's, he used to kind of be associated. He was associated with the guy from Taylor, I believe, and then he broke off and did his own thing. Because I've had Valentina's, and I'll put Valentina's up there too. It's as far as barbecue, and then of course we all went to Blacks.
Mm.
But yeah, if we were just talking in general about places in Austin, when I lived in Austin, the place don't exist anymore for nostalgia, but it was a place called Hudson's on the Bend, which at that point in time, it was out on Lake Austin Highway, out that way far northwest of town where nobody could reach you, unlike today where everything's so much accessible. But it had you would have enjoyed it, Hassan, because I know like you like to eat different types of game,
Yeah.
exotic type foods. It was that type of place where this guy, he had carte blanche to do anything he wanted to because it was his place, and he brought in things as far as Africa, Australia, as far as different types of fresh foods and
Mm.
animals, and he compiled dishes that you were like, wow, I want to try it. Once you tasted it, yeah, your palate, your range of your palate just grew enormously, because that was just something that you just wasn't going to get anywhere unless you went to one of those countries or something.
Yeah. You know what I learned long time ago? It was just about our state that those hunting reserves um, can also bring in wild game like from other countries. And I didn't know it, but I'm over here eating, what was it? Love and War in Texas. So that's Dallas. So I'm out at Love and War in Texas. I don't even remember when and why, but I know I just wanted, meat. So I look on the menu, they got antelope there. And immediately it rings off. I said, where in the world could you get antelope from within, the 12-hour drive from one end of Texas to the next? But it just so happens to be that they got those reserves there, that they're, they got ibex and antelope out there, and I had it, and it definitely was a bullet point on the list of the weird meats that I've eaten. I mean, it was tasty,
Wow.
but in Austin, I don't think in Austin I've had any game meat. I know, of course, in Houston I will, because Rainbow Lodge is
Yeah.
probably the last place left to actually do that at. But then you used to have Sammy's Wild Game. And Sammy's Wild Game was amazing.
Yeah.
And that was more like bar and street food. Like the cooks back there were, I believe they're probably from Mexico, and they were doing empanadas, tacos, things like that. Except they were using elk or water buffalo, camel. Like they were putting together camel hot dogs.
Camel.
Yeah, man, it was good.
Wow.
I took
Wow.
a I took my little baby girl out there, and we had python chili fries. And man, I'm telling you, she was hooked on that.
See, that's like being from West Texas. About the only thing I know Trent probably didn't try it, but I grew up close to Sweetwater, so you had the rattlesnake roundup, and most people won't even try snake. But hey, man, it was like chicken.
It is. It's like okay, so snake is like, I agree with you. Snake is like chicken, and then when you whatever they did at Sammy's Wild Game, that was more like it tastes like pulled pork. Because you throw the sauce on it. You got to
Yeah,
make the chili fries. It absorbed that flavor, and they did really well. Now I'm sure they did that in the slow cooker. Just how tough snake is. But I've eaten a lot of snakes. The overseas thing, you're gonna eat some snakes too. So
right.
when in Rome, fry up a snake. So
I'll have to put it on my list.
I mean, that was about the only thing. I mean, I was in the Middle East. I didn't get to try camel, but if it would have came the opportunity, I probably would have did, like you said, when in Rome, try what they eat.
yeah, what's so crazy? So how many places in the Middle East did you hit?
I was in Kuwait and this Iraq and the United Arab Emirates, UAE,
You did
Dubai.
UAE too, but just Dubai, or were you in like Sharm el Sheikh and all the rest of them?
No, no, I never did
Wow.
leave Dubai. I tried to get to Abu Dhabi, but I couldn't. I couldn't drive down there like I wanted to.
Trey's remembrance of UAE is not the same as mine, right? My education in photography and experience in photography is technically not the same as yours. But even in that conversation where I give you like 20 years ago information, it's still applicable because we're just talking about
Yeah.
academics at that point. And not to say that, and this is a very interesting question that I have for you both that I'll pen for this. But it's not to say that that's good or bad. It's just that that's how I understood how to execute this shot as opposed to shooting a couple of different frames to trial and error, right? But even when Trey's talking about UAE, I'm sure I saw 50 more buildings than he did when he was there, right? Like your UAE might have been a sandlot when you were out there, Trey.
It was growing. It was what that was 2000 and 2004, and yeah, it's like totally different world now. I could look on Google Maps and I see things I'm like that wasn't there. Same thing with Kuwait. I could look at it and say, hey, that didn't exist or something.
Yeah, it's weird. So my time out there was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 2015. And the mall is there. You got the Burj Al Arab, and Burj Al Khalif is there.
Mm-hmm.
Jumeirah is still Jumeirah. I mean, I think you probably still had the gold marketplace out there anyway when you were there, right?
Yeah, yeah, Jumeirah. That was Wild Wadi, all of that stuff.
Yeah, that was insane. I never would have thought that was I think if I could say so, I think that was the introduction to my what I would consider my standard of travel once I actually go international. Like there's a way, at least in that regard, that you want to do it, that I feel comfortable in. Cars and drivers, and certain type of car, executive travel, so to speak, and they take you where you want to go, and you're essentially paying them by an hour instead of doing a dead drop off. And then you have to find another way back. You can Uber, that's fine, and you can take the taxis, that's cool, but it's something about an R-class Benz with curtains. I mean, it changes things. With the set that we were all on, for the sake of we'll call that the Rawkicks shoot. I mean, that's what it was anyway. But I think I wanted to say that it was a pleasure having you guys on there. As a photographer, as well as the assistant. Myself, I served as creative director, and that was the first time that I took a back seat to someone else's production. I call that production yours. You and Trey and Toy, y'all really did that. Essentially, Shannon also was there, and the models too. I was calling out commands at that point.
And we were loving that. We appreciated that so much. You gave us I always say this when I talk to you, but it was like a master's class. We were sitting there learning from you, and we're just soaking it in. I'm soaking it in. The other photographer that was with me, he was amazed at how efficient you were running it and how you had your thoughts in your head and you were putting them out so quick. So it was your shoot. We were there taking pictures. We're taking our photos. It was your shoot.
I had so many concerns when that was starting, because my patience level with the people that I work with is one thing. My patience level with outside influences, i.e., passersby, people who just don't want to, let you shoot in peace. I don't have a level of patience for that. That's good for public. So, and it just comes from, I guess, how I am and then what I expect. But even with Trey, I used to think, you got 3, 4, 5 big guys around. We wouldn't really need to worry about people coming in to bother us. Nope, they don't care. They want to talk to Trey about football. They want to talk to you about what they're shooting. They want to talk to me about security detail. What? Why are you here? Why are you in my face? Then they want to talk to the models too. It's just, it's ridiculous. But it's fun doing those things for the sake of having a public production, because that's a part of the environment you can't control.
Right. And I had a little, I'm a little bit used to that because one of my loves is street photography. I would go down to 6th Street on a Friday evening or during South by Southwest, walking around and just taking pictures. And so it's a chaotic environment. And so I've kind of gotten used to how do you operate as a photographer when everything around you is going crazy or it's constantly moving. So I had a little familiarity, but I will say when you brought your direction in, I learned a lot from how do I now keep this professional while I'm in the same environment. So it was a great day for me, to be honest with you. So.
Awesome. I was thrilled to help, honestly. But the way that the shoots go, for the sake of that type of environment, outdoor environment, but with that much staff, that's kind of my expectation of what I would consider a smooth shoot. And then as it happens in real time, of course, you can dictate about what you want to capture, what you don't, what's good versus what's not. Do we need to go to this location, or do we just call it right now because we got enough product? It's a lot of things running through your head, but to manage as well as shoot, I envy you. I'm not jealous of you because I remember doing all of that because I didn't have someone as a director at the time. I'm just shooting for me, and we'd be out there all day long. I was starting to sweat. It was becoming a problem. So, but that was a good time.
Well, just to put it in perspective for you, I remember that day, and I was so amazed at how smooth it ran, how many pictures I was able to get in. I took over 1,100 pictures.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and if I would have been doing that by myself without your guidance and doing that, I probably would have got about 400. So that gives you some perspective. Yeah, Because if you had to think through all that and you're setting it up and you're moving, I can't talk to two models at the same time. You were preparing a model, and then once one left the set, you had the next one up there, and she knew what she was doing and how she was doing it. And I was just like whizzing through. So if it's any consolation, it was actually very, very productive that way. Well, and the good part about that too is I've queried you so many times and learned so much from you. When you said you needed something, I knew what you were talking about. So it was kind of like two photographers working, and one was in tune with what the other one wanted. So I mean, it sped things up tremendously.
That's good, man. I'm really happy to know that 1,100 frames. See, everything you just said. As soon as you said 1,100, I went and had a flashback to what one of my instructors said at University of Houston. Shout out to U of H. That man told me, if you're shooting more than 250 frames, you're wasting time and money. But again, remember, it's film.
It's film. Yeah, it's a totally different world in digital now. You can take as many as you can get on your card. So.
Right. And your card, when I crossed over into digital before I hung up the strap, so to speak, that card held about 300 frames, like high definition, high DPI. It held about 300 frames. You can you got a full clip, you got a whole drum that you can use. That's crazy. At 250, I always thought, and even the way I actually shot, back in my day, that was the line. If I'm shooting 300 pictures at this point, I'm done. I'm tired, and I want to eat. So I think we've gotten what we need to get. But in that limit, I did find a way to accurately execute what I wanted, also to communicate what I was expecting of them. And then once you get good at that, you can provide ambiance that makes them comfortable, so it's not just awkward, be yelling at whatever I'm wanting and you're in sheer silence trying to pose and figure it out too. It's an interesting dynamic though, because you're solving essentially algebra problems, if not calculus, in your head, trying to figure out lighting, light balance, white balance, reflections, hot spots. You want to try to avoid all of that while capturing each frame each time. And then you have soft boxes. So you're not even doing ambient lighting, you're doing soft boxes too.
What were you going to ask? How many shots did we end up with? Is that what you were going to ask?
No, I remember that, but I was just thinking about any other shoot that you do. How much of that equipment do you bring on the street when you're capturing the shots that you submit over to me?
Pretty much the same gear. I have a wagon, put the stuff on the wagon. I'll carry a couple of stands with me, a couple of light boxes, at least two light units, sometimes three, a couple of soft boxes, and I'm taking off. Now I may only use one light during the whole process, but there's always this school of thought: better to have and not need than need and not have. And so take a fair amount of equipment with me. I do. And you probably didn't see it, but I had two cameras with me as well, just because if one went down, you want to make sure you have the backup. And so, yeah. And the wagon is probably the best piece of equipment that I have.
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but I saw the truck and I said, no, he's got far too much stuff in that truck. So again, you come with the armory and then you just use what you need,
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. Right. I had a truck, I've since downsized just out of necessity, but when I had my truck, I had everything in it. And that truck took me through the photography, freelancing, set building. I was literally bringing 2x4s and canvases up to the studio that I was doing most of my work at. And Bob Warren was the owner of Houston Skyline Studio along with his partners. And that's how we met. And Bob is my mentor. He hates when I say that, but he is. I'm telling you now because he's going to hear this and then roll his eyes. But he gave me maybe 50% of what I give you, in terms of expectations, execution, just the general thought process, because he's so relaxed in his approach. And the model acquisition that we will definitely talk about that at a later time. That type of stuff, he, as well as my just natural, associations, he's the reason why I applied that technique and how I gained so many of them in the portfolio. Trent, how many publications would you say you've been a part of?
Published in, man, that's a tough one. I have to think about it, but if I just had to give it a number, I would probably say about 15. And a lot of that is some digital books that get put out, websites, as well as some hard copy books. I say 15 to 20, which to me is amazing because I never thought I would be published in one, you know.
50, so digital books, publications, and what else? What else have you been published in?
I've been published on news websites like Fox did a story on X Games, and I was out taking shots, and they picked some of my shots for that. Publications like booklets, because I've also done stuff for the city of Austin, and they have different books like gardening books and different things like that. And I never thought I would shoot a plant, but I've shot plants, and they put stuff in there. Reports. I've actually, one thing you probably didn't know that I do a lot of is I also do virtual reality type shoots and tours that I help with. I have a partner that I work with. We put together like virtual reality tours that you can put on the Oculus Go headsets and take a tour. I'll have to show you that one of these days. And I have a lot of stills in those, and those have gone out to, man, so many different places for people to view. So if I had to say how many people have seen it versus how many publications I've been in, sometimes I lose track of the publications because even during the Black Lives Matter rally here in Austin, I took some pictures. I went down with my daughter, took some pictures, and Flickr published like 4 of the pictures I took from Austin, and one of them had 400,000 views. So
Wow.
yeah.
So I didn't give you your proper title. So you are a professional commercial freelance photographer, not just freelance photographer.
I guess you can call it that. You know what? I never thought of it that way. I just want someone to enjoy the picture that I took. And it was, if someone says, hey, we like that, it's of course you like the dollar, but there's a certain amount of, I don't know if you call it pay, but yeah, in a sense, it's payment to the soul. I don't know if that'll make sense to you.
No, it does. It does. I mean, primarily, the reason why anybody, this is my humble opinion, the reason why anyone would decide to produce a work and show it to someone else, you have to be a different type of person. And it doesn't make you, an exceptional, that's all I'm saying is that there are people who perform, there are people who create, and in that you want someone to see that and somewhat in some shape, form, or fashion approve of it so that you can be accepted. That should be your first form of payment, knowing that someone does feel your work. And then the next form of payment should be the money.
Exactly. I think you nailed it with your description there.
I have a lot of artist friends. Me being an artist myself, a fellow artist and creator, we relate on the fundamental level of knowing that we have to create something, otherwise we're going to lose our minds. And then also there is some level of acceptance that we're looking for. Be it fundamental or not. I've stepped in front of jury, for the juried art shows. I've sent it over to publications. Publications have contacted me. There's a satisfaction in knowing that you're well received, at least in this area. It gives you the motivation to keep going. In the sense of assisting with these type of productions, you've helped Trent out on being an assistant through a couple of other shots, right?
This was actually the very first time that I actually been around him to be able to be a part of it.
They did an excellent job of lighting. I will say that right off the bat. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, well, having that person to put that light where you need it and they're able to get it exactly like you need it is, I mean, that's half the game. Photography is the capture of light. And if he's able to, he's like helping me out. We're just like a 50-50 partnership in there when he was putting that light right where we needed it. I appreciated that so much. Got to get him on more shooting stuff.
I seriously thought that was your third or fourth time being on set, Trey. I really did. You were just there, you pointing accurately. I'm looking out the corner of my eye. I say, no, that's going to cover the spread nicely, because I'm dealing with a medium-sized softbox. I can see it, so I know that this is going to spread about 20 odd feet worth of light, but where he's standing in my head, just because I've seen it, I said that's not even going to do a hard shadow, which is perfect because we don't want to look like we're shooting, casting hard shadows on the wall in the middle of the day. So no, man, like I said, thank you for being there because you made it easy.
Exactly. And that, well, see, and part of it that Trey doesn't really say is, Trey has studied photography himself back to high school. And, once you get the bug and you're in it, even if you're not taking pictures, you're mentally still taking pictures. And I think that just all kicked in for Trey that day. I mean, it was perfect. I've had people hold a light that I'm like, I wish they'd go home. But Trey was like almost invisible. He was doing so well.
Honestly, that's how the whole thing of bringing us all into the realm of being around each other. I just recall, Hassan, when you first started working at the job, and then it was that you were, I think, before you went overseas to the Far East, to Hong Kong, or you talked about you were still doing the film. So when it was that Trent kind of got back into everything full term, I told him about you, discussed some items that you had said in regards to what your previous experience working with film. And so he was always looking forward for the chance and opportunity to meet. And when you told me that you were going to do that run, because I explained to him how you did the runs down in Panama, I was like, okay, cool. You're going to be in the same area. He can shoot out there. It's not that far of a drive. And that's when he came, all tied in together.
Yeah, I think, like I said, bridging the gap, man. And no, I needed you to jump in because I didn't want to seem like we're over here giving a small biography of you, and you
Oh,
just
no.
listening in on us throwing compliments at you. But here's what's so crazy is that on the set that day you got Toy. I've known Toy since very very young. Like you could say we all grew up together, but she's never seen me in a professional environment. Mainly because whatever it is that I was doing, she was doing another business, so to speak, at a different time. Because I'm older than her, so you'll catch up in the business world with your peers later. But somebody's going to jump off the porch first. So I specified that she has to have professional photos. She says, "Well, why don't you take them?" I said, "I'm not taking them. I'm not going to do that." But because I'm so entrenched in watching this thing grow, I don't want to internalize the entirety of what your evolution in this business is going to be. I don't need that. You need a team. So now we get Trent involved in it. Trey comes along. Rod comes in because he just loves supporting. So Roger comes in from Ottawa Fashion as an avid supporter. That's bridging the gap because he does apparel. So does she. So now you're talking about 20 years worth of experimentation, trial and error that he's gone through that he can help her, in this direction now, just the do's and don'ts, the pitfalls, so to speak, which is the same thing that I try to give to you, to take a photo composition wise, at least from good to great. Because admittedly, you don't shoot like I do, right? And I would have to try to replicate your style of shooting. My style, as you've seen in previous photos that we shared, my style is a little bit noisy and grainy. But I hated, I really did, full confession, I hated moving from film to digital because everything that I was doing in film, I got it down to a good science, a good process. And didn't even shoot that much, knew what I was shooting and go into the dark room, get it developed and said, yep, there it is. And I can give the consumer 10, photos that they would really enjoy. But now they want 100, like the times have changed.
But seeing your style, I say the same thing. I think I definitely have an admiration for people that shoot with film. I would be scared to death to shoot with film because I have the opportunity to, take 4 shots and hope I got one right. You have 30 frames in that camera and you're going to make every one of those frames count. I don't know if I would ever consider myself a professional with film because I would have to have got to the point that I was so comfortable with 30 frames that I knew I was going to get shots that customer wanted. And I don't know how y'all did it, to be honest with you.
It's stressful. It's stressful.
Yeah. I recall that from just even just doing it in high school and then doing like a lot of personal camera wise, even up until like about 93 till I lost the camera. You just like hated to take a bad shot.
Oh my God, because you wasted money,
Right.
And so then you get a what is an Ilford 200? We're just talking about portrait photography, studio photography, right? You'll get a Ilford 200 roll. That's 36 exposures, and we'll just call that the black and white roll. So you got 36 exposures, but truthfully, you only have 12 exposures because you're going to shoot one stop up and down per frame. So you got one that's a little brighter, one that's a little darker, one that's just right, like three little bears, right? So 36 shots that you get on that road, nope, you only get 12 true different shots.
See, I'm done.
And that's why you can't shoot more than 250. You're going to be there all day.
Well, and then try to get that model to keep that pose, keep that feeling that you're shooting for, without moving around. 12 shots, I'm probably going to come out with 2 good ones for you on film.
Yeah, no, I get it. But those will be perfect. They will be perfect.
Well,
and this thing also action shots. I mean, I know Trent has done like sports shots with his daughters being competitive volleyball players, but I just remember seeing like a friend, she shot 6 rows of film at an NBA basketball game, and she came away with 6 rows, 36 exposures. Wow, she came away with a lot of pictures that day. And it was Michael Jordan at the time playing for the Bulls. And it was like, couldn't just believe how many good shots that she was able to really get.
Yeah. And so you can change your ISO settings, of course, on the digital cameras, but I used to have to remember to do that because if we're doing action shots, you're going to want to do that at 400, 800, depending on the day, time of day. But my cameras were always set to 200 on the digital side because I was usually in studio. Because those are the 2 things that annoyed me the most that you can't ever prepare for. Just like the Outkast song, you can plan a pretty picnic, but you can't predict the weather. You also cannot predict homeless people from running up and disturbing your shoot while you're actually out in downtown Houston. So
this is
those
true.
2 things
We did have that. We did have that. I forgot about that.
They were acting like they were parking lot attendants. I'm like, hey man, y'all don't work here. What are you talking about?
I was confused. I thought they, were maybe giving a tour or something. I didn't know until later that they were actually homeless because they were speaking like they had all this knowledge about the area we were shooting in. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe this is a nonprofit.
I bet you do because you kicked in the door and slept in it. Yeah, it was totally different. That's how you know the building.
But another thing that when we're talking about the old school versus the new school style of shooting and the cameras and the film, and digital, we also now I shoot in camera raw exclusively. So, being wrong a stop or so, you can correct that with Photoshop or camera raw editors now. I mean, you're not going to get the absolute most perfect picture, but the consumer probably wouldn't know the difference that you may have missed just a little bit but you would know. But that's the level of technology that has stepped up now. And like Trey said, I shot a lot of volleyball. I probably shot easily 200 volleyball games, and from high school to collegiate level. And when I look at those, you say your ISO is at 200. Well, gyms nowadays, some of them are dingy. I'm at ISO 5,000, which yeah, just to make sure I get enough light because my shutter speed is at 500, 1/500. So
1/500th of a shot. There was no such thing. This is so crazy to me. I'm the baby of the group. I am, and yet I'm the one with the old knowledge. So I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. How do you shoot 500th of a second? Because that's impossible. That's impossible when you have a single lens reflex from 1971,
right.
and it doesn't flex that fast. Right? Are you using mirrorless when you shoot at 1/500th?
Here's the funny thing. Yes, I do use mirrorless and my DSLR for the volleyball at 1/500th of a second. But with that mirrorless camera I have, I can go to 1/8000th of a second.
I don't like this at all. Now I'm done. See, this doesn't work for me. It's beneficial to have the camera with the presets this way, right? Because the evolution, this is a hot take. I mean, just bear with me. But so in school, when I'm over at HVAC, or the studio management program through the community college, one of the 2, they introduced the concept of digital photography to me. Like I'm literally in the classroom breaking down the owner's manual of the Canon A1 that I have that I just bought for this class, right? And we're going through the standard of the film. Then 8 weeks into it, the instructor comes in and says, "Hey guys, I want to introduce you to a digital back. Here's a digital back for a camera." And I said, I raised my hand and said, "Hey, what's that?" He says, "Well, this is digital photography." Raised my hand again. Said, "Hey, what's that?" So what are we talking about? It was like, we're talking about the time frame where you can only play Snake on your Nokia. Like that's the
Right,
only
right,
thing
right.
that you had.
Yeah.
So, he tells me that this thing is $10,000. I mean, it's a digital back that's an adapter to the medium format cameras that we're using. Because you have to rent those. Like, we can't afford the Mamiya because we just had to get the 35 millimeter Canon. Here I am, little inner city kid, saving up all my little pennies off the grind to try to, become this, technical artist. But the digital back was 10,000. That was a Hasselblad digital back because the Hasselblad was also somewhere around 10,000, right? Even though that big body Hasselblad is 50,000. Now, that's your next acquisition, Trent. When you get, the money, go ahead and buy that $50,000 BMW price Hasselblad
Ooh,
without the lens.
I don't know. I've always wanted some old school cameras, but I don't want that price.
Yeah.
To just jump on something you said though, when all this technology and everything, just from talking to you and really refining my process, depending on what I'm shooting, like portrait versus sports, I'm probably going to use 75% of the knowledge that I've gained from you and your film knowledge on shooting a portrait. It's still very relevant. All the things that you think about, all the settings you go through, because even though that camera can go to 1/8,000th of a second, and you can use high speed sync with your lights or whatever, you're probably still going to get that great portrait way down there, like maybe one over 125th of a second, shooting f8 in the studio. There's still a lot of right. There's still a lot of old school processes and techniques that will give you the best picture. So
yeah, I think that if someone wanted to argue that the technical approaches of the now era of digital photography would work better than the classical, so to speak, approaches in studio, I would argue with them that they wouldn't. I think that at some point in time, the studio is such a controlled environment that is going to force you as a photographer to actually breathe. Like, you can breathe now. There's no noise outside of you because there's no one disturbing that environment. The weather doesn't change. You have controlled systems of AC. Um, you can put in the music. I mean, this is a perfect environment to control. And so for that, yes, you do want to change your approach, so to speak, because your execution doesn't happen as fast. You pose them, whoever the model is, you frame, shoot f8 so you can get depth of field. If you want to do a closer portrait, then maybe 5.6, and then maybe, but what you're really still doing in that classical critique that I always give is that you're looking at the T between the eye and the nose. But even in the studio, knowing that I don't know, like, I'm talking about a set lens at this point. If you're using a 120 set lens as opposed to a 50, or the variable, then yeah, you can frame that accordingly, and then just decide, just like a sniper, just decide where you're focusing that frame. I would challenge you to actually not use the autofocus. Use the manual focus and start experimenting. You got a million shots you can put on the card. So you might as well just go with the eyes, go with the bridge of the nose, go with the ear, just see the differences. One of these is the proper way to do it in terms of executing the shot. The others are what you tend to do. So now you know exactly why I'm kind of wagging my finger when I'm pointing these out. Right. But the studio is the best environment to experiment in because
it's a
you can
good
replicate
point.
those shots over and over again.
Very good point. And to your statement of not using the autofocus, there's been a time where I didn't use the autofocus just to see what kind of shot I could get, and I was getting better shots without the autofocus. I mean, not 100% better, but they had a better feel to them. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. But
it does. It does, because you are equating this to the experience of driving a car versus being driven. Like,
right.
you get an automatic, Chrysler 300 luxury car, whatever, and it's nice, but it is not a manual Corvette. It's not a 6-speed Corvette.
I understand 100%. I don't even want to buy a car that's not stick shift, but that's why I'm still driving my Honda Accord. It's a stick shift because I like to be connected to that vehicle, and that's the exact parallel to what you're saying with that camera.
Yeah, you feel it. You got to feel it. You know what? We're gonna have to do a darkroom thing. Trey, we gotta try to find a time frame where we can actually get some old cameras. I mean, I got these here clearly. And then we can do a darkroom day. I don't know when we can put this together, but I would like to, just so that it's a different feeling. Now there's gonna pinch your fingertips because you're dealing with chemicals again,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, it's a fun
Calm
experience.
down. I think we should do that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, yeah. Like
which are
a throwback.
Yeah.
long gone are the days that we would sit in those old tank silos and upstairs and work on darkroom until the middle of the night for junior and senior block. That was different. That was a different time back then. Trent Atkins can be found online at www.grexsysphoto.com. That's grexysphoto.com, as well as on Flickr. That's FLICKR. So that's www.flickr.com/photos/GREXSYS. Look at his work. It's fantastic. If you like this episode and want to see more and hear more of this, go ahead and like and subscribe. Also, leave a comment down below. Weekly episodes are coming to you, launching on all DSPs, social media platforms for advertisement. You'll know how to get in contact with us. You can go ahead and jump on the website also, join the mailing list. There's more information about the concept of Qualified the Podcast, as well as how to support.